Back. Mr. Clark's back. Time to take a look at 11.2 as Europeans gain additional footholds in and around Asia. So, once again, as we move forward, we'll go through the questions. As we go through, try and think through the question each time, think about a response you might come up with, and then check that with what I uh, explained to you as we go through. So, some of the key objectives as we move forward today, we're going to summarize how Portugal built a trading empire in South and Southeast Asia. We'll analyze the rise of the Dutch and Spanish dominance in Asia and the Indian Ocean. We'll attempt to understand how the decline of Mughal India impacted European traders in that region. We'll describe how European contacts with the Ming and Qing dynasties in China worked out, and we'll summarize Korea and Japan's attitudes towards contact with the outside world. Question one: why was Portugal the first European empire to dominate the trade routes or routes into Asia? So they were the first, as we had looked at previously in 11.1, the first to find the water routes around Africa. Prince Henry the Navigator had really emphasized in his country much earlier than a lot of the other leaders throughout Europe to emphasize exploration, and a lot of his explorers were very successful. Small but powerful ships controlled the routes, established many forts along the way. Two, the Portuguese did not attempt to conquer inland territory. What does this tell you about their assessment of the inland empires? So they had two issues with trying to take control of inland empires. One would be obviously it's a lot easier logistically to get your navy in a position to dominate coastal regions or islands, opposed to the interior where the armies are unknown. Maybe they're kind of hunkered down in good positions. It would make it a lot more difficult for the Portuguese to actually put an invading army into a territorial land. Okay, you see the image there. Experienced General and Admiral Alfonso de Albuquerque spearheaded Portugal's effort to build a trade empire in the Indian Ocean. And that's a typical style of dress during that period of time in history. Three, how did the Dutch become a very powerful nation by the 1600s? Wealthy merchants had financed explorations into Asia. They formed what turned out to be one of the more powerful exploration companies, the Dutch East India Company, which made huge profits from their adventures around the world. Four, support the statement the successful voyage of a Dutch fleet carrying spices led to a frenzy of overseas activity. The activities of Dutch warships and trading vessels soon made the Netherlands a European leader in overseas trade. The establishment of Dutch colonies and trading posts around the world, including a strategic settlement at Cape Town, also supports this idea. So, frenzy means just a huge competition for territory around the globe. Five, why do the leaders of the Netherlands give so much power to the Dutch East India Company? Actions could occur much more quickly if the company's leaders can make their own decisions and not have to wait for the approval of the Dutch government. And when you think about their explorations around the globe, the communications from one spot of the world to the other would take several weeks and maybe even in some cases months to get back and forth. So they needed the autonomy to make their own decisions along the way in the best interest of the Netherlands and of the Dutch East India Company. Six, how did the location of the Philippines make it a valuable asset for Spain? It was ideally situated near East Asian mainland and across the Pacific from Spain's American colonies. The Spanish could ship silver that they mined in Mexico and Peru to the Philippines, and goods from China could then be purchased with silver. 7. The Mughal Empire gave trading rights to several European countries. What does this suggest about the Mughal Empire's assumptions about the power of these European countries? This suggests the Mughals felt that the power of those European countries, even with concessions, was not great enough to be a threat to the Mughal rulers. In this Mughal illustration, painted on fine cotton, a servant is at work, kind of standing on a richly decorated carpet. Indian carpets and other textiles were highly prized trade goods during this period of time. Okay, question 8 is kind of a lengthy one. Compare and contrast the approaches Portugal and other countries took to trading with South Asia and Southeast Asia. Albuquerque employed both Portuguese military might and diplomacy to control the Indian Ocean trade, destroying Arab fleets, capturing East African towns, setting up military and trading outposts, and negotiating with southern Indian princes. Similarly, the Dutch applied military force and established outposts, but in contrast, they founded more lasting colonies and formed closer relations with local leaders. See, the Spanish also used force, seizing the Philippines and making it a key base for their trade with Southeast Asia and China. D. The English and French first sought trading rights from the powerful Mughal Empire. They were granted concessions and built forts and warehouses on India's coast. Later, as the empire declined, they formed alliance with local leaders and officials and fought each other to dominate and control India. 9. Why do you think the Ming eventually allowed the Portuguese and other Europeans to have some limited trade with Chinese merchants, despite the fact they wanted to remain separate from outside forces? The Ming wanted gold and silver, meaning they wanted to profit. They realized that the great amounts of these metals could be acquired by trade with Europeans. They therefore felt that limited European trade could potentially be worthwhile. Also, the Ming considered that completely forbidding trade with Europeans might be very difficult to enforce. They knew that the great potential profit of such trade would be a very strong motivation for smuggling. The Ming decided limited trade with Europeans would be their best policy. 10. How did the Manchus include the Chinese in the Qing dynasty? The Manchus adopted the Confucian system of government to rule China. They selected one Manchu and one Chinese for each top government position. The Chinese remained in charge of the local government. The Manchus enforced loyalty by stationing their troops throughout the empire. 11. What factors contributed to peace and prosperity in the Qing China? New crops from the Americas, such as potatoes and corn, raised farm output and in turn contributed to a population boom and further strengthened their economy. Qing governmental practices, including extending Chinese power into Central Asia and promoting Chinese culture, strengthened the empire. Europeans desired fine Ming goods such as porcelain vases, which had intricate designs on them. It's one of the more valuable things that came out of China during this period of time in history. Porcelain is still a very pricey ceramic today, and something that has a lot of wealth and value associated with it. 12. What did King China's trade policies with European nations in the 1700s tell you about the state of the King economy? They suggest that China had a very strong, self sustaining economy. China did not think that a trade with Europe was necessary or very important. 13. Why do you think Lord Macquarie's mission to China became a problem for future relations between the British and King China? The vital importance of respect and trust in relationship between countries. In their evaluation, might note that this event occurred because of the misunderstanding between the King Chinese and Lord Macartney. The British goods Macartney presented seemed so inferior that the Chinese interpret them as gifts offered as a tribute. Macartney also demanded an imperial audience. Then he refused to perform the traditional kowtow before the emperor. So I'll give you a moment or two to get this down since it's kind of lengthy. Okay, look at this little visual image here. European trade activities in China were strictly limited. Only countries that observed the rules of the imperial tribute system could hope for permission to trade. So it's kind of a multi-step process. The Chinese tribute system, foreign countries were permitted to trade with China only after their ruler or official envoy demonstrated subservience to the Chinese emperor by paying him a tribute. Foreign ruler and envoy presented the Chinese emperor gifts of great value from their country. Foreigners showed subservience by doing the kowtow of 3 kneelings and 9 head bows to the ground, which is something that Macartney refused to do previously. Chinese emperor recognized the foreigner as a vassal and gave him gifts of silk, porcelain, and other valuables. Repeat steps 1 through 4 every so often to remain in good standing. The foreign country was granted trading privileges to China. Okay, now moving on to Korea and Japan, as they choose isolation. What was Korea's main reason for choosing isolation? Korea desired to avoid being controlled by its most powerful neighbors, China and Japan. 15. Why did both Japan and Korea respond to increased foreign contact by going into isolation? Both were small nations that thought they could survive more assuredly by remaining isolated. 16. Why did Japan allow limited contact with the Dutch but not with the Spanish or the Portuguese? Because the Dutch did not send a large number of missionaries, the Japanese may have felt less threatened by them. Perhaps also the long Dutch trading presence in South and Southeast Asia made them more acceptable to the Togawas. Lesson reflection question: how did Europeans attempt to trade and colonize China and India impact those regions? Open up one another to culture and trade eventually led to, unfortunately, turmoil and conflict. Hopefully you enjoyed our discussion here in 11.2. Remember, you could always pause along the way at any point in time if you need to get a little additional time to get anything down. And until next time, Mr. Clarke is out.